Welcome back to Hypertrophy Academy. Today we're touching on exercise execution. So, what should we be looking for when we're analyzing our own technique or technique for clients? The way we do things is arguably more important than what we do. For example, you could do a perfect exercise, perfect in terms of resistance profile, position, etc. But if you did it poorly, it'd be pretty shit. Whereas alternatively, you could take a pretty mediocre exercise by definition, maybe slightly unstable, whatever, and do it really well, and it would be better than the first option. So, exercise execution, super important. It never gets touched on in the science-based community, at least from what I can see, because I don't think many people have a very good grasp on how things should be done practically. I think that a lot of people can recite, where a muscle has the best leverage or what might be an ideal exercise, but when it comes to actually doing the exercise, it never looks that pretty, at least from what I've seen. So today, we're going to be going over some of my lifting videos to analyze what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong, and where I could improve. If you guys have any thoughts about any of the exercises, feel free to put them in the comments. I will happily defend or sort of explain why I'm doing certain things, but let's just get straight into it. So this is a single arm preacher curl that I have at my gym. Now, I would usually do something like this bilaterally because time efficient, but because of my shoulder dislocation, I have to lean over to the side, otherwise it's too much external rotation. So when I'm doing an exercise like this, what am I looking for? Well, I'm looking for it to be hardest in the bottom half of the range of motion because of the internal moment arms, but also the length tension relationship of the bicep. So we seem to produce a little bit more force at longer lengths. If you imagine like a Velcro, in the longer length portion of the lift, the Velcro is overlapped quite nicely where it can produce a lot of friction or force. Whereas in the really shortened position, we have way too much overlap and then you don't get as much surface area, so not as much force. That's how you can think of the length tension relationship. The biceps like slightly longer lengths. Not a stretch, but slightly longer lengths. So what I've done here to adhere to that is I've put the seat up because this machine has a bit of a tricky resistance profile. If you sit at the normal height that you ideally sit at the way the machine's designed, it's really hard in the shortened position. If you put it up, it's easier, but it's hardest in the bottom, and you can see right there, I fail right at the very bottom. Super hard. That's our first box ticked. I'm obviously looking to have my arm and shoulder not moving. We only want to move from the elbow. I obviously don't want my shoulder rolling around everywhere. That's very common. And we'll get to that in a second on a normal preacher curl. We want to keep our shoulders still for obvious reasons. It's not involved in the motion, so it shouldn't be moving. Now, that's a pretty general rule that you can apply to your exercises. Is the joint that I'm trying to chain the only one moving? If not, you might have a problem. So for example, this will be covered, I'm sure, in the video, but Kelso shrugs. You're not training your erectors, so don't round your upper back. That's a very, very common science-based example. People doing Kelso shrugs where they round all the way forward over the bench. You're not doing stiff leg deadlifts. We're not training erectors. Anyway, so shoulder isn't moving. We're only moving through the elbow. We've got a good resistance profile. Now, I'm always looking for a few things when I'm coaching. I'm looking for the intensity, obviously, how hard we're training. I'd say this is pretty hard. I'm looking for a consistent range of motion and consistent control. If the range of motion or the control get worse as the set goes on, we have something to improve on, we have something to fix. My range of motion is consistent, my control is very consistent. It probably gets better as the set goes on, actually, and then I fail. Moving on, we'll go to a different preacher curl because this is something that you guys might have in your gym that you might be using. Two very common examples. And here we have a slightly different movement, even though it is the exact same joint action. We just have elbow flexion occurring. What's different about this one, aside from the fact that I'm lying on the machine, that's just because of my height. We are in higher degrees of shoulder flexion. So you might find the shortened position on this movement is a lot harder than the shortened position on the other preacher curl. So if I pull them up next to each other, you can see the shoulder position is different. Here, I'm in the anatomical position, arms by my side. Up here, I'm at, say, what is this, 70 degrees of shoulder flexion. The more we go up, the weaker the bicep gets. So that is all to say that in a movement like this, if you avoid that top of the range of motion, if you only came up to here, that would be fine. If you go past that, that length tension relationship starts to really punish you where the biceps get super, super weak. It's called active insufficiency, right? Where we have too much overlap inside the muscle fiber and we can't produce a lot of force, the Velcro analogy. So on a movement like this, where we're in higher degrees of shoulder flexion, you do not have to come all the way up. You could honestly do the bottom half of this movement as I'm doing here. I could definitely come higher, but I'm choosing not to. And you can see how slow the movement gets at the top because my bicep is getting weaker as I come up. Now, the reason that I chose this one specifically is because of the shoulders. Now, I'm not doing an amazing job of this in this video, but you can see my shoulders roll forward into internal rotation. So right here, shoulders are, neutral, whatever you want to call it. And then as I come down, watch them rotate in. It starts right here and they rotate in like that, up and in. So I have scap elevation and internal rotation. Now, I'm a bigger dude, powerlifting history, don't have the best mobility. You might not have that issue at all. One thing we definitely don't want happening is the shoulders moving up and down. So you might see some internal rotation, which is the shoulder or the humerus rotating sort of towards each other. That's okay. That is part of the range of motion, right? You are becoming more internally rotated as we extend the elbow and more externally rotated as we come up. That's normal, but we don't want the shoulders coming up to the ears. And I think I'm doing a decent job of avoiding that, but it could be better. And for most people, it's just an ego problem. If you're having that issue on the preacher curl, you probably have an ego problem. Now, for a preacher curl like this, we also want to have the pad right up in our armpit. That's why I'm lying on the machine. So, video's frozen for whatever reason, but that pretty much covers everything that I would want there. Like I said, if you have any questions about why I'm doing things that maybe I haven't mentioned, please let me know in the comments. So for our lats, not much to comment on. So we're going to pull up two movements, the lat pull down and the single arm lat pull down. Now, in my opinion, these are the only two movements you will ever need to do for your lats. So many of you will not have this Nautilus pull down. But what I'm doing here is leaning back so that my arm doesn't get too far up over my head. If I sit up tall, my arm ends up way overhead and the lats probably don't grow super well up there. We really want to focus on that sort of mid-range for the lats, in my opinion. And so that's why I'm leaning back. Now, I'm also leaning back because it provides a counterforce. Stability is not always something to press against. Stability can also just be your body weight. Your body weight can provide stability, right? So let's say this load is, I think it was, what was I up to? I was about 3/4 of the way down the stack. That's all I can remember. That is probably somewhat equal to my body weight in terms of my torso. I'm 100 kilos. I don't know. It was about the same. So my leaning back was almost enough to have like a perfect counterweight. Obviously here I'm making sure that I finish that range of motion with each rep. You can probably see that it becomes a struggle to actually finish that contraction as the set goes on. But I'm doing my best and I think I finished all of these reps. If we compare the range of motion of rep 1 to rep whatever it was, not much different, right? I'm also making a conscious effort not to crunch over to the side or to crunch to the front, whatever, because that will give you sensation through here. Of course, it's your obliques, which are very close to your lats, and so it feels like a lat sensation to crunch over. which is actually a pretty good idea for an Instagram reel. But it feels like a lat exercise, but it's actually your obliques. So don't crunch over. You're just shortening the lat and using your obliques to get a sensation. But that was a good version of that pull down. Alternatively, you could do the JPG style pull down, which just looks like this. Again, my body weight is providing a good counterweight. Still exactly the same movement that we just saw before, just a different machine. And most of you can relate to this. Body weight as a counterforce, hand as a counterforce. We're not having our head up or down excessively because that will influence our upper back position and restrict our scap movement. And one very important thing with both of these movements, we're not restricting the scapula. We are letting our arm and our scap move freely. I'm not pulling my shoulder down on the eccentric. All I'm doing here is letting my arm and scap move together, reach forward, and then drive the elbow down. In driving the elbow down and back, you will pull the scap down into depression. If you find that your shoulder is up towards your ear as you finish the range of motion, there is something seriously wrong going on. So the shoulder and the arm can move freely on the stretch. Don't stretch too much, we're just getting some length through here. Like this is probably adequate. That's just me relaxing. I'm just letting it take me. Then I drive my elbow down. In doing so, I also pull the scap down into depression. That's what I'm looking for here. I'm not looking for elevation on the stretch, but I am actually looking to cue depression as we come down to fully shorten the lat. Now, probably not super important. As I said, the lat's probably working really well in the mid-range, but I think it's worth mentioning because we don't ever want to be rowing or pulling up here near our ears. So, our lat pull down, the infamous Terry's major pull down. Again, we're not doing a heap of stretching up overhead here, and I'm also not restricting my shoulders. Yes, I'm stopping before I go up, so you could call that restriction in a way, but what I'm saying is I'm not like pinning my shoulders back and down and then moving through my arm. So what a lot of people will do here is they pin their shoulders back, down, whatever, and then they let their arm move up overhead and they get a crazy sensation. Any crazy sensation beyond like a ridiculous bicep pump is probably your body telling you you're doing something it doesn't like. If you are restricting your scap, you're pulling your scaps down and trying to move your arm, you are restricting what your body is trying to do naturally. Same goes for lateral raises. So let the scaps and the arm move freely. Yes, we probably want to avoid stretching all the way up overhead, but we shouldn't be restricting anything on the eccentric. We're just controlling it. We're not restricting our body's natural movement. I'm just making sure that I don't let it stretch me up to the ceiling. That's all. Now the cue here is to just sit up tall, drive the elbow down. This is a pretty good set. I could probably have gone a little bit higher. I don't think it's a big deal to go a little bit further up overhead. The exercise is obviously still hardest about here, right? So even if you do fully stretch up, it doesn't matter that much because the exercise isn't very hard there. So the exercise is hardest here, right? But we have the biggest external moment arm. So I don't think it's a big deal, and I think a lot of science-based dudes, I'm one of them, by the way, I think a lot of us will, in order to avoid loading up the pec and the long head of the tricep up the top here, we restrict too much to the point that it becomes awkward as fuck, and then it's just shit. It looks like shit, and it's hard to execute and standardize, etc. So lats, letting the arms move freely, the scap move freely, not stretching too much up overhead, driving the elbows down. Pretty simple. You can apply that to all lat movements. Keep your shoulders forward, head forward. Don't rotate, don't crunch. Lats are pretty easy. Pecs, I will choose two of the classics. We will go with the pec deck and the pec press. And these are from the same training program, these videos. So that's neat. Pec deck, I like to get into one arm at a time. You might recognize that still frame from my profile picture on Instagram. I like to do it seated or standing, but one arm at a time nonetheless. Now, I'm not doing a good job in this set, which is why I'm using it. I am not doing a good job here. This is not a nice set. So we are moving into, well, first of all, shoulders are up towards the ears. Don't like it. We're arched through the spine. Don't like it. I'm excessively bent through the elbows, which I don't mind, but it's just adding things on here. And I'm externally rotated, which I don't like. So, I wonder if I have a better pec deck video to show you what an actual nice pec deck looks like. I might. Keep in mind I'm injured in the video you're about to watch. This is a much nicer position. Okay, let's compare. I'll give you a second to have a look at that. What's different? Well, we're in more internal rotation in this one. We're in more external rotation in this one. External rotation on the pec deck, not a good idea. Not good for force production. Not a nice position to be in. The difference as well is in the butt position. My butt is shuffled forward. I'm arched up. I'm extended. My shoulders are up towards my ears. Whereas here, I'm shuffled back. I'm neutral. My shoulders are down. Now, it's going to look a little bit awkward because I am injured and I'm in a lot of pain here, so don't worry about that. But the mechanics look a lot nicer. That's a much nicer set. Much, much better. So, left, pec deck, not good. Don't like it. Not a good position to be in. Ego got the better of me. Look, it's still going to work, but not as good. Now, the control in both is good. The intensity is good. The range of motion is consistent. Those are the basics. I'm trying to go over some better biomechanics with you in this video, not just control is good, blah, blah, blah. This looks a lot nicer. I'm happy with that set of pec deck. Range of motion is good. I'm getting a stretch, but not a big stretch. And I think I'm avoiding lockout here because, oh no, I'm not avoiding lockout. I'm not, but sometimes I do if the resistance profile is really heavy on the triceps. So this one's pretty heavy on the chest, not so heavy on the triceps, so I do lock out. The control's great. I think I'm just a little more arched than I'd like. We don't really need an arch. I just want to have my shoulders pulled down, that's all. Now the arm path is super strong for me. This is a good arm path for my build. This is the arm path that I use to bench press, so I know that it's strong for me. And the grip width is just what's comfortable. Now, imagine you are recording from the front. You would want to see your wrist directly in front of your elbow, so stacked. So what you'd want to see is the wrist directly over the elbow like that, and I'm pressing like this so that there is a nice arm transfer of force. If I have it on the inside, not only am I going to have more tricep range of motion, right, and probably a sorer elbow, but it's an inadequate force transfer where the joints are not stacked over the top of each other. Same with it being on the outside. Now, that matters a lot more for a barbell bench press, but you will find, even on a machine press, if the joints are stacked, you will be stronger. So that's what I'm looking for with grip width. So if I'm ever with a client and I'm thinking, grip looks funny, we will record from the front. I will see if I can see the elbow or even from above, and then we problem solve from there. But this is a good set. I'd honestly say the only critique I would have for this is, other than the ego lifting, probably just a little bit more arch. And we could probably use a bit more control in the stretch. I don't like how it is controlled really well, and then right at the last second, I dump a little bit to utilize that stretch reflex. So I don't like that, but a pretty good set of pec pressing overall. Let's go starting with the delt press. This is a long time ago, over a year. Now, for the delt press, ideally you sit like perfectly vertical, but that's not usually very comfortable for a lot of people. So you will notice here that I am on the second highest incline. Now, you might make the claim that, oh, well, if I'm not perfectly vertical, then it's an upper pec press as well. Maybe there's a little bit of upper pecs in here, but like, I just don't care, honestly. This is what's comfortable for me. If I go higher, I can't do it. So I'm doing it like this. Now, you will see in the mirror, I'm arched, and I shouldn't be. I should sit a little bit taller. But again, I'm just doing this to get this movement strong as fuck. A lot of questions I get about my training are like, oh, that's not perfect. Why didn't you do this or that? And it's like, dude, I just want to be really strong at this movement. I don't care necessarily how I have to do it. Now, that only applies to some things. Now, if I was trying to maximize deltoid hypertrophy, yeah, I'd clean this up a little bit. But I just want to get a big, strong overhead press. Now, this is the one time where I actually find that being a little bit unstacked is nice. So you could make the argument here that my hand's on the inside of my elbow. Nonetheless, though, if you remember back to the pec press analogy, this is probably perfectly stacked and I am like just inside of it, ever so slightly inside. For whatever reason, it's stronger for me. Whether it's because triceps can contribute more, I don't know exactly. But you could even make the argument that I am perfectly stacked. I don't know. It's a bit of a funny angle. Nonetheless, the hands are pretty much over the elbow for that nice force transfer. You could go a little bit wider, but I just generally find it so much weaker. You wouldn't want to go any closer than this. The control here is decent. It was pushed quite well. I don't know if the range of motion was super consistent. Obviously, I'm not coming all the way up to avoid really stressing that tricep at the top, but it's certainly not the same range of motion every time. Like if we go back and compare this first rep to one of these reps, I'm definitely coming up higher as the set goes on. That is part of the problem with using a partial range of motion is you never know really what you're using. So looking back on this set, range of motion could be more consistent. My range of motion actually got better, like it got bigger. So I wasn't cheating necessarily, but you could make the argument that as the set went on, because it started feeling harder, to make sure I wasn't cutting range of motion, I started using more range of motion, which is a problem in itself. It's a good problem to have, but it's still a problem. So if you can always opt for a full range of motion, it's easier to standardize. In the instance here where I was like, I think I was doing dips as well. So I didn't want to just add more tricep stress or elbow stress or whatever you want to call it. So I didn't lock out. Obviously, there's not a big moment arm at the top. So it's not as hard at the top as it is in the bottom. But I still didn't want to lock out. Good set overall. Really not much to comment on. Could probably sit a bit taller. And definitely could weigh the bench down because it looks like it's wobbling a little bit. And that's not ideal. So other super common shoulder exercise. This set I was really happy with. Not much to comment on here. The arm is kept straight. We're only coming up to parallel. We're pushing away from our body, not pushing up. I'm not arching. I'm not restricting my scaps. I have been using straps on this one in the past, but I don't use them anymore because I actually found I had better hand pressure without straps, which led to better proprioception and also more force. So one of my issues with the cuffed things that you guys are seeing on science-based TikTok is that it's usually not great for force production. First of all, we get something called a remote voluntary contraction, which is basically more motor recruitment when we are squeezing something. So if you're going to use a cuff, squeeze something as well. But you'll also just find from a coordination point of view, we have a lot of input from our hands and our feet and our face, right? So hands holding, feet on the floor, whatever. If you don't have your hand squeezing something, it often feels worse from a coordination point of view. So for me, straps were a good idea to make it more stable, but it actually made me weaker. So I went back to full hand pressure, squeezing, which was the right choice here, immediately stronger. This exercise was super consistent range of motion throughout. Don't think it was pushed super, super hard, but end of the workout and I was feeling, quite honestly, a bit lazy. So pretty good overall. Could be improved on, but nothing major. Now, before we start, there are two big things that we're looking for. We're looking to keep the chest down and we're making sure we're not stretching too much in the bottom to the point that protraction turns into thoracic flexion. Very different movements. I'll show you. So this is protraction. My arms are pulled forward, right? The scaps go from close together to further around the rib cage. That is protraction. Yes? Then this is thoracic flexion. Can you see the difference? That's protraction, arms pulled forward. That is thoracic flexion. See how my spine changes shape? Now there's obviously some extra protraction in there, yes, but not very important. I don't think we need to stretch the traps. Now, the reason this is an issue is because you then have to recover from that. So you'll kind of like lose the humerus a bit in that it becomes very hard to pull it back. But also, you then have to pull yourself from flexion back into neutral or extension. So then you have to use your upper back erectors. So the erectors obviously run the whole length of your spine. They erect your spine, they extend your spine. So if you round, you then have to pull yourself back out of it, which is not the muscle you're trying to use, which then reduces motor unit recruitment to the traps and the rear delts and the upper back, whatever. So in this video here, I don't round. I'm pretty good at not rounding. So I couldn't show you in this one. That's why I showed you in this one. But for our T-bar, we want to keep the chest down, which I'm not doing an amazing job of here, but you want to think about driving the elbows and shoulders back while simultaneously pushing the chest forward. So what I think about is literally just shoulders back, chest forward. The arms will follow. Now, because the traps don't move the arm, it doesn't really matter how far your arm gets pulled back as long as you're pulling your shoulders back. So if you find that you're in maximal scapular retraction at this point in the screenshot and your arm doesn't have to travel any further, great, awesome. You might have different length arms and slightly different scap mobility, range, whatever, and it might look a little bit different. But this is decent for how heavy it is, right? 6 plates. I'm doing a decent job keeping my chest down. I'm not overstretching in the bottom. One thing with the T-bars is I find it easy to have the head in this position. A lot of people will tuck or overextend, and not only does it change the shape of your cervical spine and then your thoracic spine probably, it's just awkward, and people often change throughout, which I don't like. They usually go from looking down to looking up or vice versa. Try to keep your head constant. This is neutral, or it's slightly extended. What you do not want is looking down, because that then, like I said, changes the shape of your neck, upper back, you round, and then it goes back to the example I showed you here where we're rounding, which we don't use the traps forward. So there's no point in doing it. And then old mate was making a joke about how heavy the machine was, which is great. Kelso shrug, I've already sort of pointed out what I went wrong with here. I am doing a good job of keeping my chest down, actually. And very, very important that we keep the elbow locked out, because some of you guys I've seen doing Kelsos with a super bent arm, and at that point you are just like, what bends your elbow? Your bicep, right? So we need to keep that elbow extended. Now, one of the reasons that we might have the elbow bend is because the long head obviously goes onto the scap. So when the scap moves, it's going to want to pull, and then you won't be able to keep your elbow extended. So it's not necessarily always the bicep doing that. It actually can be the long head of the tricep trying to move at 2 joints and experiencing a very short length, right? And so it wants to bend more. So it's not always bad, but if you're just like doing half a bicep curl, it's time to pull it back. But I'm keeping my chest down, and the only thing wrong with this set, in my opinion, is the rounding. Too much ROM in the bottom, but like this is a great set. I'm moving through a lot of range of motion at the top, like I'm getting a good squeeze. I'm also getting some elevation, and I'm pausing there to standardize the range of motion. I'm not pausing for any like hypertrophy reasons. It's just a practical reason. And I think this is the time that I had an AC joint injury. So I think considering doing pretty well. And that was a pretty good set, I would say, based on the speed at the end and the fact it's a more of a shortened position movement. I would say that was failure for me. So pretty cool. Last one, triceps. I will pick 2 very common movements, the latter more common. So let's start with the crossbody tricep extension. For our crossbodies and for our pushdowns, I like to use the cuff, as you can see in both videos. I'm in a slight amount of scapular retraction. That is to stabilize my shoulders. This is trying to pull my arms forward. It's trying to pull my shoulders forward. By pulling back, it's that same counter force we were talking about before. Not every exercise is perfectly stable, nor does it have to be. So I'm in a little bit of retraction. My arm is away from my body. Now, if you're going to do a crossbody extension, don't just do it across your body and then do it like this. some people will do a crossbody extension and it looks like that. It's like, that's just a push down. The reason that we might do a crossbody is we might have a better time extending the arm out here. This might be better for our triceps. Now, this is probably not theory that some of you have heard before, because it doesn't get spoken about on TikTok and Instagram. But because of the line of pull, the fact that the long head goes onto the scap, in this position here with the orientation that our scap is in, it might be able to produce more force. Maybe. So even though the medial and lateral head have more leverage in this position based on their internal moment arms, we might actually be putting the long head in a better position for producing force, because it is a shoulder extensor as well. So by finishing the movement in some shoulder extension, but also at this 30 to 45 degree angle, you might be a bit better off in terms of long head. So that's just got to do with more with scapular position and the line of pull of the actual muscle fibers, how they align from the elbow to the scap where they originate. Not theory that I've really want to go into, honestly, but I think it's worth doing this movement. I do like it. Doesn't have to be in your program, because it does have some limitations, being some stress on the AC joint for some people. It's a little bit unstable as well, but I really like it. If you're going to do it like this. Stand back. A lot of people stand too close. What I'm looking for when I look at this movement is, am I actually bending my elbow enough? A lot of people will stop like here and then come back out again. You need to use that range of motion. Have the hand finished just slightly inside the elbow if you're looking from the front. Keep the shoulders pulled back ever so slightly, and just make sure we're moving through the elbow, not the shoulder, which I've done a good job of here. And I should not have lifted my feet up like that and changed my center of mass, because we see here as the toes come up, the hands shake around. That just goes to show how much balance and stability matter. But a pretty good set overall, considering. I'm pretty happy with that set. So for our cuffed push down, I don't like using the cuff above the wrist for the same reason that I spoke about before with holding something, for the remote voluntary contraction for more motor unit recruitment, but also because of the coordination. I truly believe that having the cuff above the hand is harder to coordinate. I know that taking a joint out theoretically improves stability, improves motor unit recruitment to the target muscle. I know the theory, but I don't think it's worth it. And I personally, I think that there are some strong people problems that you come across with things like that others may not experience. So this is me doing the cuff push down. Not the best set, honestly, but certainly a lot better than some sets I've seen online. The mistake I'm making here is not coming up high enough. You can see I'm trying to change directions at the point where the exercise is hardest. So this is where the exercise is hardest because of the moment arm. But I should be coming up a little bit higher, not because we need to stretch or anything, but because changing directions at the point of the movement, which is hardest, is awkward as fuck. So I'm trying to change directions here where the exercise is hardest, which you will see becomes very awkward very quickly. I should come up just above, then come back down. See that rep there? Tried to cut the range of motion short, went really badly. Shoulder starts moving around. Lat, teres, rear delt are switched on pretty hard to hold me here because it tried to pull me out of position, because I tried to change directions in the part of the movement that was hardest. So I should have come up a little bit higher, but I'm doing a good job keeping my shoulder still and my elbow still. My arm is not moving, right? My upper arm is not moving. I've got my hand around for stability, for coordination, but also as a reference point. If I don't put my hand around, I don't know where I stood last time. I need some sort of reference, right? And I have a slight hinge at the hips because that puts my upper arm at a parallel to the cable like this. Whereas if I stood tall, it would be like this, and that becomes a little awkward. And if you imagine my arm was here, it would want to pull my arm forward more. So I actually sort of line up my humerus with the cable, and that makes it easier to keep my arm there. But overall, obviously that set was controlled decently well and pushed really hard. That was failure and beyond. Now, glutes, I don't have many videos, so let's just go through two of the big important ones, the back extension and the hip thrust, the shortened position, where the glutes have their biggest internal moment arm. You can see in this video here that I'm using a dumbbell and a band. I will not explain why. I can't be bothered. I don't think it's worth explaining. It's not better for hypertrophy. It was just the circumstances I was in. Now, the bands are set up far back so we have tension come on early. A lot of people use their bands and they put them at the front, and then the bands come on really late. And with the bands coming on late, you go from basically no load to maximal load very quickly. Very awkward. So you want to have the bands come on as early as possible. Obviously, they're still hardest at the top, but if they come on earlier, the change in load, the resistance profile isn't as tricky to overcome, and it should be a lot easier to hold your hinge. And now, speaking of holding our hinge, you will see that my lower back stays neutral / extended the whole time, and I'm actually moving through the hips. I'm actually getting length through the muscles I'm trying to lengthen, the hamstrings and the glutes, and I'm not moving through lumbar flexion. There might be a little bit of lumbar flexion in the bottom because I personally, I really do struggle with hinging of all movements, but it's not excessive, right? Obviously, the control is really good. Most of the reps are the same speed. It doesn't get faster. I'm not rushing. I'm taking my time. I could add a little pause at the top to make sure that I was fully extending my hips to standardize the range of motion. That can be useful for banded exercises. But overall, I think this is a pretty good set. Probably moving from neutral to extended in the spine, so probably a bit more erector in there than I'd like, but it wasn't excessive enough that I think it's taking away from the leg stimulus. So a pretty good set overall. This is a nice set, in my opinion. Hip thrust. Should not be wearing runners. We should have a flat foot for sure. I'm making one big mistake here, and it's the toes. See how our toes are coming up? These are my feet. I am supinating and externally rotating at the hips, and I want to have big toe pressure. So big toe needs to be pressed down with a flat shoe, and this would be pretty much perfect. I'm keeping a neutral spine. I'm not going too low because it's not a lengthened position movement. The control's pretty good. It wasn't pushed hard though because this was my first time doing this hip thrust. Overall, a decent set, but we definitely need better shoes, toe pressure to push harder. But other than that, I was pretty happy. So that's glutes. I know a lot of you guys are guys, so you don't care about glutes, which is why I'm not going to spend much time on them. But hamstrings, I will go through two of the very common ones. We've got the leg curl and the SLDL. Now, in this stiff leg deadlift video, I do actually hurt myself. Pretty unlucky, to be fair. But we're looking for a few things. We're looking for a neutral spine. Perfect. Very, very neutral. We're not going all the way to the floor because I don't need to go to the floor because that is far outside the range of motion I have. If your hamstrings attached to your pelvis, which they do, and you lose your pelvis orientation, you are not getting more length through the hamstrings. So if my pelvis is neutral or anteriorly tilted, which it is here, probably more neutral, and I go beyond that and it starts to posterior tilt, which would be back toward the camera in this position, I am not lengthening my hamstrings anymore, and I am loading up my lower back. A lot of pressure through the vertebra, and obviously then you're training your erectors as well, which it might be the goal here, but you should never aim for a change in shape of the spine. You'll train the erectors through an isometric here, no problem. But I'm doing a very good job maintaining my hinge, very nice and controlled, not using an excessive range of motion, and I actually hurt myself here. That took me ages to recover from, about a month actually. Lower back injury, crazy enough. So the big thing here for me, you can see my toes coming up off the ground. Same thing as the hip thrust. Need to have more toe pressure. As we come down into hip flexion, that is in internal rotation. If I'm externally rotating at the foot, if I'm having the hips externally rotate, I'm trying to create hip flexion with external rotation, which is a problem. We want internal rotation. So we want the feet parallel, facing forward, big toe pressure. Don't shift your center of mass back onto your heels. That's a problem for a few reasons. That's, in my opinion, the only thing that could be better about this set, because I think it was pretty good up until I got hurt. So big toe pressure and it would be sorted. Now, hamstrings. What am I talking about? We're already doing hamstrings. Seated hamstrings. I am leaning forward because at the time it felt like the only comfortable way to do the exercise. Now, if you're leaning forward, just remember you're going to have excess muscle damage. More length, more damage, longer recovery. So just be mindful of that. What I'm looking for here is a fully extended knee, which I am not getting. That is a problem. I am looking to keep my spine neutral again. A lot of people will do this and it looks like shit, quite frankly. With their lower back rounding a heap and their pelvis tucking under. You are not creating more length, you are only creating more sensation. They are not the same thing. So keep the pelvis neutral, keep the lower back neutral, so you can actually lengthen the hamstring. If we have a 2-joint muscle and we are moving both of the joints, we have a problem. If you are allowing movement at your pelvis and your hips, while you're also moving at your knee, the hamstring is probably not going to do a very good job. So keep the pelvis still, move through the knee. You do want to get a fully extended leg, which I later fixed with a different setup, and I don't think I even have a video here of it, but I did fix that. I figured out that I can sit up tall just like this and do the exercise properly like I could at my old gym before I moved. You can see that I get a pretty much fully extended leg. That's pretty close to what my fully extended leg looks like. And you'll see that the control here is pretty good. I'm not getting a massive stretch, but it's good enough. That set was pretty good. So hamstrings all done. Moving on. Adductors. I have a video on my page of how you can do the adductions when your gym doesn't have an adductor machine. I don't have the video on me right now, so for this video, we're just doing our seated adductions. I like to get in using my hands because my adductors feel like they're going to snap off in the lengthened position. Once we're in the middle, quickly shuffle the hands back to pull myself down and squeeze. The control here is really good. I think that over time, I would like to improve my range of motion. I don't have very mobile hips. I never have. And that can be a form of making the exercise harder, right? Would be more range of motion. Or we are required to manage more joint torque. It's probably a better way of saying it. But adding range of motion in this instance would be a way of making the exercise harder because I've full stacked it already and maybe I don't want to gym pin it, so I just use a bigger range of motion, right? Harder. That set was pretty good. I'll show you a different angle because we don't have many videos here. Same machine, using my hands to get in. Once I'm in, pulling myself down. Now, I personally find the more I lean back, the worse it feels on my glutes and I cramp up. So I sort of sit neutral, up tall, good posture, whatever you want to call it. That's just more comfortable for me. This set here is controlled well, pushed very hard. This is one of those machines that it looks pretty easy and then you fail. And so from a technique point of view, you are going to want to know where your exercises are hardest in the shortened position, what failure actually looks like. So let's use leg press as an example. A good leg press, pushed hard, it will look hard for multiple reps. It will be slow. It will look very hard and you will pump out a few more reps. Like some people would see that and call it quits. That'll be the end of the set. But I pumped out a few more, right? That is what a more lengthened position movement will look like. Whereas a shortened position movement like the adduction will fail very, very quickly, right? So for this set, obviously we pushed to failure, so the intensity is not a problem. The control is pretty good. I think it's I'm in control of the weights, right? That's what I'm looking for. I think it's quite consistent. The depth is good. We really don't need to go this low. Yes, I'm getting a stretch here. Maybe I get more stretch gains, but it's probably a bit excessive. I'm having my heels come up because I have to. I don't have good ankle mobility. Even with the best leg press I've ever used, a big heel lift, my heels still come up. Unfortunately, it's one of the many reasons Not many. It's one of maybe 2 reasons why quads are my weakest body part, other than genetics and surgery, is ankle mobility. So I'm having my heels come up. It's not ideal, but sometimes you can't avoid it. If you can't avoid it, go for it, use it. But if you can, if it's fixable, work on your ankle mobility, keep your heels down, better for force production, but a good set overall, right? And you can see, as I said, there are multiple reps where it looks really hard before I fail. That is what you'd expect of a lengthened position movement. Now, a shortened position movement like this might look easy and then you fail. I don't know about this video specifically, I don't remember, but judging from the speed already, I think it's going to be one of those sets. So it looks pretty easy based on speed, and then I fail very quickly. So we go from moving pretty quickly to basically, that was 1 RIR within 1 or 2 reps. So just know, when you're judging intensity, you have to take into consideration the muscle strength based on the length tension relationship and the resistance profile. But as for this set, didn't rush into the first rep, which a lot of people do, and it's probably not very nice on your knees, so I probably wouldn't do it. I would start the set nice and smooth like this. I pull myself down. I apply a little bit of pressure, right? A little bit of pressure into the pad. Then I ramp it up, and then it starts moving. So it's not like a 0 to 100 thing here. It's like I slowly started applying more pressure. That is how I would keep my knees happy here. The control is excellent. I'm not rushing out of the stretch position, which a lot of people do. They come down, they feel a little stretch, and they try to rush back out because they're impatient, ego lifting, I don't know. But I even add like a half pause in the bottom. See, it's just like a second where I make sure it becomes motionless, and then I go again. Obviously, with this exercise, we're looking to have a seatbelt. We're looking to pull ourselves down into the front of the handles. We are looking to keep the hips constant. If, again, 2 joint muscles, if they're moving at both joints, you have a problem. So we don't want our hips moving. We want to sit up nice and tall. We want to have, very importantly, we want to have our knee in line with the axis of rotation. This is where this is rotating, so that's where we should be rotating, right? And in saying that, you also get the pad supporting a lot of your hamstring, so extra stability. So I often see people sitting too far forward where there's this gap between the pad and the back of their knee. That is a stability loss. You're losing out on stability, and you're probably sitting in the wrong spot. So make sure the knee lines up with the axis of rotation. Make sure the pad is supporting as much of your hamstring as you possibly can. And my personal favorite that I never ever hear anybody else talk about is having the ankles in dorsiflexion. Can we please stop pointing our feet down? There is a study, and I don't have it on me. There is a study looking at knee extensor strength in dorsiflexion. We are stronger with our feet in dorsiflexion, pointed back up towards our face. You might think this is neutral. Oh, he's just relaxing his feet. This is my ankle mobility. This is as far up as I can come. I think it has something to do with the gastrocnemius acting at the knee and the ankle. In fact, I'm sure it has to be that. It probably can't be anything else. But you get a lot of feedback from your hands and your feet. In my opinion, having them up, better for strength, better for coordination. You can try it. Anecdotally, you will feel stronger. Just make sure the pad is not in your ankles. It might look like it's in my ankles. It's not. It's just above. Don't have the pad in your ankle, because then you won't be able to have your ankle in dorsiflexion, and the ankle will move under load, which is terrible. You don't want to load a joint that's not involved in the muscle you're trying to train. So pad above the ankle, feet in dorsiflexion. If that sounds like BS to you, try it. I promise you it will be better. Then come back in the comments and apologize to me and say it was awesome. Thank you, Declan. But good set, good control, pushed decently hard. I think this was like a week 1. So, oh no, this was after I came back from single leg extensions. So I wasn't pushing super hard yet. That was probably 1 RIR for me. And then boring, lucky last, we have calves. Now, the technique here will be the same for standing, leg press, single leg, bilateral, whatever. You want to get a big stretch, maybe a little pause in the stretch. using a half range of motion based on the data we have. Now this is a fun anecdote. I have my foot down. Whoop, bump the mic. Hopefully it's still recording. I have my foot down because of coordination. Back to what I was saying before, we have a lot of sensory input from our feet and our hands and our face. So if I have my foot in the air, I'm actually less coordinated. When I put my foot down, I'm more coordinated. Now this is the most science-based cringe ever, but like it works. Even just the heel, better than nothing. I've tested it. I'm not pushing through the foot, but I am absolutely like immediately weaker if I pick my foot up. Now, you could argue it's because a muscle has to pick my foot up, so central motor command gets sent to that muscle, so I lose motor unit recruitment. I don't think that's what it is. I think it's coordination. So I like to have my other foot down as a reference. Don't push through your foot, but have it down. And I think that's everything. I know I sort of rushed. It's been like an hour, so you guys probably are bored to death if you're still here. But that is how I would assess exercise execution for the lifts we went through. Now, obviously those are my examples, so I have a bias. I have a way of doing things that is, anecdotally successful for me. It works for me, my clients. You might have a different idea of biomechanics, or you might want things done a different way slightly. Just remember, not everything we do is based on resistance profiles and internal moment arms. We've got to consider that, I work with 80 people a week, work with hundreds of people over the last 5 years. Almost nobody trains perfectly. What I mean by that is almost nobody has their enjoyment aligned perfectly with perfect biomechanics, physiology, programming. Almost nobody. In fact, probably nobody. And what I mean by that is sometimes I'll tell a client, hey, let's do this because it's going to be better for muscle growth. And they go, nah, I don't really like that. I'm not going to enjoy it. Or they try it. Sure, Declan, I'll try it. I don't like it. Let's not do it. So we've got to remember it once again that like, if we are doing something because it's perfect, but we don't enjoy it, our motivation decreases. We don't train as hard. If we're doing something slightly worse, but we do it really well, really hard because we enjoy it, the latter probably gives you a better stimulus. So remember, perfect is the enemy of good, or whatever that quote is. I think that's what the quote is. And that is something that we see a lot when we're working with real humans. I work with real humans, but I also like to understand the science and use the science. So hopefully you took something away from that. That is not how I respond to clients when I'm coaching, if any of you are wondering. If you're a coach watching, I obviously... Oh, there's a dog. I obviously have a certain way of doing things when I coach, things that I point out to clients that I didn't point out to you guys, ways of speaking that get messages across that I didn't use in this video because that'd be weird. If you're interested in that, maybe I'll do a video on like how I coach in the future. But if you made it this far, if you made it 55 minutes into the video, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed. This is going to be awful to edit. I've never edited an hour YouTube video. Hope it was worth it. See you next time.